Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of the More You Look podcast. This is going to be the final episode of the year. As you can see, I'm in my Christmas jumper. And today we have a very important guest. He's a friend of mine, he's a colleague of mine. He's an advanced clinical practitioner. Also, he has MBE from the royal family for his services to the NHS. Welcome to the show, Shibu.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I am wonderful, thank you.
Lovely. It's very, very lovely to have you here. And I won't bother asking you how you're spending your December because we mostly spend it at work anyway.
Of course. Plus, we are in the middle of the COVID pandemic.
True, that is true. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay. As you can see, born in India. I completed my education, including my nursing education from India, from one of the prestigious universities in India. Came to UK in 2002. Worked in one of the hospitals in Kent for 14 years in different specialities, including intensive care and critical care. So then I moved on to a different role, quite an exciting role, I would say. It was called Specialist Nurse in Organ Donation or an Organ Transplant Coordinator job with NHS Blood and Transplant in the southeast of England. So I was covering the entire southeast of England. So that job involves organizing organ donation and transplantation from the beginning to the end. So I did the job for nearly 6 years. So now I am settled in an advanced clinical practitioner job with Medway Urgent Care in Kent.
Of course.
Okay, and in the meantime, since I arrived in the UK, I was fortunate to do several education opportunities, I would say. Managed to do my master's, managed to do my independent prescribing course, and also a PhD in education.
Lovely.
So,
wonderful.
Quite settled in my role at the moment.
Yeah. Do you see that I am smiling as you are explaining it? Because it's like I'm a fan, you know? I should have my pom-poms out right now. Like, you are, you know, and you forgot the part where you actually created a university course that is actually being studied by students all over the world in St. George's University in the UK.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's just, I don't have words to. It's amazing. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's get into it. My very first question for you is, there's this general stereotype that, you know, people who come from Indian, basically Asian communities, they ensure that their children study within the healthcare sector or IT. You know, because if you look around this country, I was telling my wife the other day that, come to think of it, every pharmacy I go to, I rarely see a white person there. It's either it's Asian or African. Is this stereotype true?
I would say it is true because Asian communities spend a lot of emphasis on education. The first generation Asians in this country, in the UK, I don't think a majority of them never had an opportunity to go to university for a university graduation. Most of them worked in the farms or running taxis or worked in small shops, but they always dreamed about sending their children to much higher education possible. Again, in my case, my parents never had a chance to go to university. They only got maximum secondary school education. So, but they worked hard. Even those days in India, we never had an opportunity to get an education loan to pay for a university fee. So he had to work 7 days a week to pay for my university fee, which he did. Happily he did. So, and again, the healthcare jobs and IT sector job is considered kind of a status symbol in our community, I would say.
In the Asian community.
In the Asian community itself. And it's a social status, well-paid job, and it is a respectable job. So more people are inclined to encourage our children. Even I'm encouraging my children to think about these kind of healthcare jobs. That's kind of a pattern is going on in the Asian community. Plus, again, I would say it is financially rewarding as well.
Oh yes, it is.
And there is a common expectation for us to look after our elderly parents when we get older. So if you have quite a good job and if you have a quite good job, good savings, parents always think, okay, they will be able to look after me when I get older. So you always look at sending the children to kind of a secure job. So the IT and healthcare always gave that kind of assurance for us to say, yes, this will give a decent income, and for us to look after our own family and our parents when we get older.
Yeah, as you're explaining, it seems to me that we sort of have a bit in common with the African community, but for us, it's not really quite set in stone, like as in study IT or study within the healthcare sector. We know that we have lots and lots of Nigerian doctors in this country, and I know quite a lot of us are also into IT. And that's really, I've always wanted to ask someone from the Asian community why this is so, and let's go, that's a good segue into the next question. Let's talk coronavirus. And why do you think, in your clinical opinion, why do you think the BAME community, why do you think we're mostly more susceptible to this virus and why it affects us more?
Okay. If you look at the total UK population, it's around 15% of the total UK population is BAME. But if you look at the Department of Health figures on the number of deaths due to COVID virus, we can clearly see the people from the BAME community are quite disproportionately affected with the number of deaths and the number of people who are actually being affected by the COVID situation. So mainly, if you look into the factors, there is a common theme emerging from the healthcare situation in the BAME community. There is a high risk for us to develop conditions like diabetes, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, liver failure, kidney failure. These are quite common conditions which affects the Asian population and the black population compared to the white community. When you have these underlying health problems and when you get infected with a nasty virus like COVID, the management of the complications would be much higher. It will become really difficult for us to manage, and these conditions will also give rise to so many other complications. So as a result, people with underlying health problems are more likely to die from a COVID virus infection. According to the statistics, I would say the BAME community are twice likely to die from COVID virus compared to the white Caucasian family. There is one more factor from my own observation. The Asian and BAME black families, we are family oriented much compared to the other communities, and some of them live in extended families, and some Asian families depend on the elders to look after the children. So as a result of this overcrowding, close social interaction, the chances of self-isolation are quite limited. That actually even putting patients from the community at risk of catching the virus and not being able to manage. So I think if you combine all these factors together, it actually gives us a theme why we are actually more affected by COVID.
Do you think, because I was thinking that a lot of, if you look at the NHS, I would say, like you said, 15% of the total population of this country are BAME. But if you look at the NHS itself as an entity, I think we have quite a lot of BAME people working within the NHS on the front line. Which I would say is probably one of the reasons why it seems that quite a lot of them really got, affected and died from the COVID virus. Would you agree?
I'll certainly agree, because the staff, if you look at the staff numbers within the NHS, a front-facing workforce of NHS, a majority are represented by the BAME community. Nurses, doctors, even people who are actually in the front line, reception staff, laboratory staff dealing with the specimens, they're constantly exposed. It's not just one exposure, it is a prolonged, constant, repetitive exposure. We're having to deal with this kind of exposure. So that in turn gives a more chances of us getting a virus infection compared compared to people from other background working in an office with a limited contact with patients of suspected or confirmed COVID.
Now, going on from that, my next question, I already know these things, but the reason why I invited you here, and before I go for that, I would really like to thank you for making the time. I know you are an extremely busy person, but for you to create that time to come on the show,
it's my pleasure.
We really appreciate. Now the question is, as a BAME person working in an hospital, what can one do? Because I think coronavirus is associated with very low immune system. And what can one do to boost the immune system? Because I think a big thing that so many BAME people don't know is the value of the vitamin D and how it is mostly very low with BAME people. Can you shed some light on this? What is the importance of vitamin D amongst the BAME, and how to boost one's immune system, being able to be able to combat or to be ready for the COVID virus?
Okay, I mean, vitamin D is otherwise called sunshine vitamin. Okay, it is essentially for bone health and skin health, and bone and muscle health essentially. It is actually produced in your skin when we are exposed to ultraviolet rays of the sunlight. In this country, from October to March, April time, there is not much sunlight. And again, we got a tendency to run away from sunlight as well. We are not exposing enough to the sunlight. But again, it's not the exposure, it's the quality of exposure is very important because of our skin type. So for a white person, their skin is white, and the content of melanin is actually the pigment which actually gives your skin the color. So for us to get the same amount of vitamin D produced by a white person, we have to have more exposure because of the protective effect of melanin, and we are not doing that enough. Again, dietary sources on its own sometimes may not be enough to boost up the vitamin D levels. And if you look at the number, according to the latest data, around 4 people out of 5 from the BME community are deficient in vitamin D. That is a shocking number. That's over 80 to 85% of the people in the BME community are deficient of vitamin D. The benefits of vitamin D is always well known in the past. There's lots of studies about vitamin D and its benefits, and it's always proved that vitamin D can help to treat or recover patients better with respiratory infections. And as we know, COVID is mainly affects your lungs.
Yes.
So if you boost up the vitamin D levels, it can enhance the recovery from a COVID infection. That's actually been agreed by the Department of Health and also by all other science bodies. That's why at the moment we are managing patients in intensive care with respiratory problem. We're replacing vitamin D for everybody. So we can actually copy that from that experience into our common daily living.
Yeah.
So you can get vitamin D from any pharmacy. You don't need a prescription. If you can get a 400 international unit of capsule every day, that should be sufficient enough to build up your levels.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is there anything like overdose of vitamin D? And like you said, 400 should be enough. Say somebody used 1,000, 2.
Yeah.
Because I've heard of someone say, "Oh, yeah, I'm so scared of COVID. Like I use like 2,000, micrograms of vitamin D capsules every day." Like, is there anything like an overdose?
Okay, so when you take a capsule through your mouth, always remember it has to be digested in your stomach, then has to be absorbed into your blood system. So the stomach acid will neutralize around 40 to 50% of whatever you take in terms of medicines. So if you take 400 units, your body will get less than 200 into the system. So the remaining will be destroyed by your stomach. So you only get a fraction of what you take orally. So, and again, once it is actually metabolized and stored in your body, it will get used up accordingly. There is no concern about overdosing. So if you get but again, these kind of things, you need to have a blood test once every 6 months. if you're deficient.
I was coming to that.
Yeah,
I was coming to that down the line.
Of course. We'll talk about the blood test a bit later.
Yes.
So, and if you are extremely deficient, there is an option to take an intramuscular injection of a vitamin D. That will give up a boost. Then, once your levels are up at a safe level, you can carry on taking oral tablets. But historically speaking, vitamin D is always considered to be best for building up your immunity and also to fight respiratory infections. And it's kind of reinforced its importance during this COVID pandemic by all the science bodies. And everybody is just supporting the evidence at the moment.
Okay. So remember the question I asked was, as a BAME person, how can one boost their immune system? We've talked about vitamin D being one of the, if not the most important element.
Yeah.
So what of other, like, I know I've heard of people taking vitamin shots.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just want you to sort of shed a bit of light on this.
Of course, okay. So immunity, not just building up immunity, it has to be your improvement of your overall health. So we have to take ownership of our own health, especially the people from the BME. They are mainly work oriented because they have lots of other commitments, financial commitments, childcare commitments. They will be supporting families back home. So they constantly working, running from one job to another. So there is limited option for these people to look after their own health. As a result, as I explained in earlier on, they got high risk of developing these complications like diabetes, hypertension. But I work in GP surgery as well. But the number of people who come for regular review of the medication and also for blood test and for even just for blood pressure check, the number of people who don't even attend those kind of appointments is astonishingly high, especially from the BME community. So we need to take ownership of that. Yes, it's my health, it is my well-being. I'm going to attend those appointments. It is very important. I need to have a blood test every 6 months to see where I am standing for. I may need to have a blood pressure check every few months to see whether I am on the right medication. So you need to manage these chronic conditions. Once you manage the chronic conditions, your overall health will improve. And that will certainly improve your immunity. Say, for example, if you have diabetes and your blood sugar levels are not very well controlled, when you have high amount of sugar in your blood system, you're automatically susceptible to catching other infections, simple infections like urine infection to other complex infections. High blood pressure, if it is not well managed, it can lead to stroke, or other cardiovascular problems. And if your blood pressure is not very well managed, it can cause damage to your kidney. So overall boosting of your chronic conditions and monitoring your healthcare is very important. That's the first step. Second step, you can think about nutritional supplements. There is a way of taking supplements over the counter, orally, but as I explained earlier on, only a fraction will be absorbed into the system. And there is a new trend which started in America. All the big celebrity stars, they are getting intravenous drips with multivitamins and amino acids, which is proven to be quite popular.
I think the person who started that in the UK, well, the first time I saw that in the UK here was Simon Cowell.
Of course, yeah.
Where, you know, he would have this drip just going into him. And I would think, what, is he on drugs or something?
Yeah.
And then years later, I began to hear of it.
Yeah.
I've had it too.
Yeah.
I know that is one of the services that you, So I would like you to sort of discuss, you know, how one can go about getting these shots.
Yeah.
And because I know it's something you do.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us, you know, when you started this and where one can, you know, come to?
Okay, so I work as a health consultant as well as part of my all other full-time jobs and work I do with the GP surgery, because I realize there is a demand, there is a need for the service for patients who are actually leading a busy lifestyle, doesn't have time to go to the pharmacy and buy these vitamins and make sure they take them 3 times a day rigorously, because some of people work night shift, day shift, they forget things, taking medication. But the beauty of taking intravenous vitamins is almost nearly 100% of the vitamins will be absorbed into the system. There is no loss in your stomach. So almost all of it will be absorbed into the system, and the patient will benefit from all those medicines which is given to them. So these are water-soluble vitamins administered as a drip, which can be given over an hour or two. So, and the patients can have once every 3 months or once every 6 months, depending on the requirement and depending on their lifestyle. It's very popular among the movie stars and also sports stars, but it's actually slowly coming into the general population as well, because everybody's aware of the benefits of vitamins at the moment, especially in this pandemic as well.
Yes.
So if anybody needs more information, I'm more than happy to help them. I can offer them an impartial advice of what they need to do, and I'm more than happy to help them as well.
Okay. Do you have like a website or like a social media handle or phone numbers?
Of course, yeah.
Can you give them to us?
Of course,
we'll also put them at the bottom of your screen when the show comes out.
Okay. So my website is called Revivemedics.com. All the information is there on the site, and also my Instagram page is also called Revivemedics. So all the links we can supply on the interview.
Nice. Now moving on, we were discussing something earlier before we started shooting, and because on one of our episodes we invited one of our very special guests who actually runs an organization for sickle cell, and she was letting us know that in the BAME community just 1% give blood, donate blood. And after that episode, it became clear that so many of us in the BAME community don't even know the value, the importance of donating blood, towards helping other people. And based on your clinical knowledge and experience, would you say what do you think is the stance of BAME people towards organ donation?
Okay, so I work for NHS Blood and Transplant, which is an organization in the UK controls and manages and facilitate organ donation, transplantation, and the blood donation for all hospital settings. So I worked for them since 2014 until 2019 as a donor transplant coordinator in the southeast of England. That job involves speaking to the families to get consent for organ donation once their loved one is declared brain dead. So in my experience, when I speak to a family member from a BAME community, only around 30% of the BAME community members would say yes to donating their loved one's organs once their loved one is declared brain dead in an intensive care bed, compared to 65 to 70% from other white Caucasian background. But the sad fact is, when you look at the waiting list in the UK, around 6,700 patients on the waiting list to receive an organ. But a majority of those patients on the waiting list are from the BAME community. And while I do this job for facilitating the donation transplantation, one of the processes is called tissue typing. That means matching a donated organ with the recipient. An organ which is donated by a white person, like a kidney or a liver, will not be the best match for a person from a black or Asian background because our tissue types are different. So as a result, these patients from a BAME community would wait longer to receive a transplantation compared to the white person. So if you transplant, these organs will fail. So as a result, this is a vital resource. They don't want to be wasted by transplanting onto somebody who is not a match. So as a result, patients from the BAME community are dying more while waiting for a transplant because
that's not forthcoming.
Because there's not enough people are donating.
Why is this so? Because she was saying, one of our guests, Chanel, was saying that just 1%, and I'm thinking, why do you think this is? Is it based on spiritual beliefs or cultural beliefs, or just a lack of trust?
It's a combination of factors. First of all, I would say lack of understanding of the process. Second one, people are using religious and culture background as a way to get out. even though none of the religions are against organ donation. All the major religions in the UK are supportive of organ donation. And the third one, I would say, how people are worried how this process is carried out. I was even asked by donor families how the person will look like after donation. Are you going to leave my family members tummy open after taking the kidney or liver? Even though I've explained to them, okay, this process, organ retrieval process, is a very dignified surgery which is carried out by the most experienced transplant surgeons in the country in an operation theatre. And they will be carried, after the process is carried out, will be switched out and it won't be visible from outside. And most likely that organ would benefit someone from our own community itself. So during those conversations, there are some interesting themes came out. So that actually led me on to doing lots of campaigns within my community and also other minority communities to create an awareness of organ donation and blood donation. So if you look at the NHS organ donor register, now we have an opt-out system. Unless you want to be a donor, you have to opt out. But still, it is not legally enforced. That means the family will be consulted. Still, the family will be still the ultimate authority to say whether they want to donate or not. So during that 5-6 years when I worked for organ transplantation, I have campaigned with several communities, encouraged them to sign up onto the NHS organ donor register, and I managed to get around 3,000 people from the minority community onto the NHS organ donor register.
Do the applause thing. Wow, that is amazing. Yeah. That is amazing.
So I mean, even though the numbers look quite small, when you attend these events, I was able to speak to so many people. They managed to clear lots of misconceptions, give out leaflets for them to think about. So even though they haven't physically signed up onto the register, they have taken away the important message for them to think about. So until at least when somebody asks them about organ donation or blood donation, when their loved one is declared brain dead, they would know, yes, this person has talked to me in the past. So they will have some understanding. So hopefully, I'm trusting that may lead on to making them a decision in favor of organ donation.
It does sound like a tedious job that never ends, though. You know, this awareness thing, because I don't see the government doing enough. I know they're trying, but they're not doing enough. But you're saying that you got over 3,000 families to get on board with organ donation. I would say that deserves a round of applause. Thank you. You deserve your MVP.
Thank you.
Don't worry. Now, moving on, this is an issue that personally is very important to me, because I realize that one of the biggest issues we have amongst the BAME communities is actually ignorance. And I won't say lack of information, because the information is out there if you're willing to find it.
Of course.
I think it's just based solely on ignorance. You know, I stand to be corrected. And because when people hear that word ignorance, they think it's a big insult, which is not. It's just a word that says that you really don't know about this, you don't care to find out. And now, you know, you're suffering from the consequences of not getting information on these issues. Are you familiar with the Avengers? Do you know the Avengers, the movie? Thanos and all the rest. The Infinity Gauntlets that Thanos that he wears to control all that gives him so much power.
Of course.
If I was to liken the Infinity Gauntlets to men mainly, for me it would be testosterone. Because most men don't even, people generally, but mainly we're focusing on men now, because we're focusing on men's health. And I think that most men, quite a lot of men, don't know the importance of testosterone. Growing up, if I hear that word, the only thing I think of is that thing weightlifters injecting themselves just to, you know, let them have weight. And now, you know, years later, I realized that it is actually the infinity gauntlet for men, and it works for a lot of things. It controls your sex drive, your bone mass, fat distribution, red blood cell production, and I would like you, from your clinical point of view, to discuss how important it is to also keep an eye on your testosterone levels, how to do so, and what to do if there's a deficiency.
Okay, so men and women, we all get older, and as we get older, there's lots of changes happening in our body. So testosterone levels peak between the ages of 20 to 30. Then afterwards, the levels will slowly start to go down. For females, it is actually well recognized. They do get the same kind of changes, but not related to testosterone, their own hormonal changes. They do get hot flushes, and they do become irritable. So they'll go to the GP, and the GP will send them for blood test, and they may start some hormone replacement. They will recognize the perimenopausal symptoms early, and there is lots of options for managing those symptoms for women. Men also has got the similar symptoms when the testosterone level goes down. But unfortunately, what men does is men tend to hide those symptoms, and they don't actually go and seek help. That's one of the biggest factor. They say, okay, these changes are happening in my body, or otherwise they may go to some website and get some other medication.
Say your testosterone is very low and it's affecting your sex drive. They go for Viagra.
So they don't seek expert help. So they just go to some internet sites and buy some temporary fix medications and get over it. But they're not realizing by doing that these problems are not going away, but it's actually getting worse and worse. So, for men about mid-30s or even early 40s, what happens is when the testosterone level goes down, one of the first things happen is their mood will change. The mood changes, the concentration, they will become irritable, their sleep pattern will change, they start to gain weight, body changes will affect, their attention span will go down. Sleep disturbances, always fatigued. Patients may develop type 2 diabetes.
How about depression?
Depression, sleep, of course, it can develop depression. They start to lose hair. And one other thing will happen is it will affect their sexuality. The quality of erections and the libido will be affected as well. And some men also develop something called gynecomastia. That means they will develop the man boobs. So the man boobs. So all these changes will happen to the body. So people need to be aware of these symptoms which is happening in the body. So if they're actually identifying these symptoms are happening to the body and they're actually in that particular age group, I would advise them to go and speak to the GP as soon as possible. Explain to them, I'm having these symptoms, I would like to have a blood test including testosterone. GPs can never decline a blood test. So rather than going for the temporary fix like a Viagra. So once the blood test is done, if the testosterone levels are low, GPs tend to send the patients to an endocrinologist.
Yes.
Okay, the endocrinologist mainly does more investigations like SHBG, prolactin, lots of the extra blood tests to see what actually the reason for the low testosterone levels, and they make a treatment plan accordingly. So it is a complex and long process, but we have to be patient, especially in the COVID pandemic. They're not doing any face-to-face appointments with endocrinologists. Most of them are remote consultations, so it might take longer before you even speak to an endocrinologist. But the first person to go to would be your GP and ask for a blood test. Okay, and if the levels are low, there are lots of treatment options like testosterone gels or testosterone injections, which they will decide based on the recommendation from the endocrinologist. So first of all, the reason why it is quite important to investigate further, the testosterone is actually produced in your testicles, essentially, based on the message from your brain. A part of the brain called hypothalamus, which sends a message to another area called pituitary gland. You might have heard about the pituitary gland.
Yes, of course.
So hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland creates some extra hormones which actually travel to the testes, and the testosterone is produced. So they can't just look at why the testosterone levels are low. They need to look back to see where the problem is. Then they have to make a plan accordingly.
They find the root cause.
Then treat accordingly. So there is always help available, treatments options are available. It's the best person to speak to would be the GP. Would be the GP.
All right. Let's start rounding up a little bit. At what age should people start sort of, going to the GP to request for blood tests, say every 6 months? At what age would you recommend?
Okay, so when I work in the GP surgery, when I look at patients' historical records, I would see some patients, they haven't had a blood pressure check or even a blood test for over 5 years. And I ask them,
BAME, right?
Yeah. So when I ask them, do you remember when was the last time you had a blood test? They wouldn't even be able to know what. And when you look at that blood results 5 years ago, I can clearly see they were kind of borderline cholesterol, borderline thyroid function, and borderline risk factor for developing type 2 diabetes. But they never bothered to go back and check again until it's prompted by the GP. I know the general practitioners are working under immense pressure at the moment. They've not been able to send reminders for blood tests for patients if they are well. If they go and ask them, there is no option, there is no facility, or there is no capacity for a GP surgery to do that. As I said earlier on, we have to take ownership of our own health. So once you reach around mid-30s, especially in the BME community, you should have a blood test at least every year. It doesn't need to be all the fancy blood tests. Just your full blood count, your kidney function, your cholesterol levels, vitamin D, and your thyroid function. That should be more than enough, and a glucose level if they can do. 5 blood tests will certainly transform your life. And then go back to again in a year's time to say, hello doctor,
Updates.
I haven't had a blood test for 12 months. Can I have a blood test form? Then it will be looked into. So once you have the track record of blood tests every year from the age of 35, absolutely the best option. And if you have an underlying health problem like a diabetes or a heart problem or a liver problem or a kidney problem, that frequency should come down to once every 6 months. Do not leave more than 6 months. Especially because of blood pressure medications, they are harmful to your body. They are all chemical. Essentially, all these medications are chemicals,
there you go.
And they can cause damage to your kidney and the liver, long-term damage. So as a result, we need to be monitoring these blood tests and making sure they're not causing unnecessary harm to your organs. And if they're changing your kidney function, sometimes you will see your creatinine levels are going up, your GFR will go down. That is the amount of filtration which is happening in your kidney. So as a result, we may need to adjust the dose of medication so that your kidney or the liver don't sustain unnecessary damage. So it is very important. So if you have an underlying health problem, blood test every 6 months, otherwise at least once every year.
You know what amazes me is we live now in a country where all these facilities are actually available at your fingertips. All it takes most times is just a phone call. But people still, especially the BAME communities, we just don't like to pay attention to our health. And the funny thing is, majority of us come from countries where healthcare is not easily accessible.
Or you have to pay money to access it.
Through the nose. To get these facilities, but why do we not make use of these amenities available?
We are very fortunate in this country. NHS is an amazing organization, free at point of care, even though there are lots of people misuse it or abuse it, but it's free at point of care according to what was actually the original theme when it was formed 50 years ago. It's still free. If people doesn't know English, they can't read and write English, there are options of accessing leaflets in alternate languages if they want to get the information. facilities for blood tests, all investigations are available. And again, people in our community are at high risk of developing cancers, breast cancer, cervical cancer. We send out invites for flu vaccinations. A majority of the people from the BME
They don't come.
won't even turn up for the BME.
Mammogram invitations, they won't show up.
Cervical smear, flu, they won't show up. So we have the facility here. So again, going back to taking our own ownership of our own health.
And then when the repercussions happen, like breast cancer and all those things, they turn around and blame the old woman back in their country. They call them witches and wizards that have sent attacks to them, spiritual attacks. You know, I think as members of BAME, we need to learn to take more responsibility,
of course,
of our own health and for our health. And last question, I promise, because I put you on the hot seat enough. How does it feel working in the front line, in the ICU with the COVID patients? How do you feel pressure, or how do you mentally prepare yourself going into work?
Every day working in a critical care unit is a challenge, because at the end of the day you have a patient on a ventilator who is sedated and paralyzed on multiple medications. They are on 3 or 4 organ failure supported by different organ before a complex of ventilators and other machineries. They're on a ventilator to support their breathing, 2 or 3 inotropes, which are the medication to support their blood pressure, medication to support the kidney function, and most of these patients are on a dialysis machine to keep going, on nearly 100% oxygen flow, combination of antibiotics. So you are on your toes when you're working with these kind of patients. They are called level 3 patients. Level 3 patients means they have 3 organ failure. But in this COVID scenario, we are seeing more than 3 organs have failed for those patients.
Simultaneously too, sometimes.
Simultaneously at sometimes. And they are actually the most vulnerable patients in the hospital. And the resources are extremely thin at the moment. In terms of human manpower, we have all the machineries in every single ITU. But the hospitals we work for, a lot of staff members are off sick with COVID. So we are struggling. In my current employment scenario, I'm got redeployed to work in intensive care from next week onwards. So I have taken up the challenge because that is my background. So I can do whatever I can help those patient groups with my skills in intensive care. So we need the resources. We all need to pull together to support these patients. But these patients are actually, because the visiting is restricted. Previously, when the patients are recovering, they used to have their family members around. One of the major things is when these patients are actually on a ventilator for so many number of days, they're actually, when the patient wakes up, they're actually waking up in a kind of delirious situation. That means they don't have an idea what's going on.
They've been in a clinically induced coma.
Clinically induced coma. They have a section of their memory completely wiped out. They wake up with a complete delirium. And intensive care is one area, they have bright lights 24/7. There is no turning off lights. So the patients don't have a clue whether they are at 10 o'clock in the morning or 9 in the night.
They're even in heaven. If I open my eyes and there's white lights everywhere, and then I see a nurse, I'm like, is this heaven? Are you an angel?
I mean, it's quite funny as well. I mean, I would say it's one of the jokes shared to me by one of my colleagues. A patient who woke up in an intensive care unit. He was surrounded by foreign nurses, I would say, nurses from Philippines and also from India. This patient started shouting, taking me back to England. Because he didn't realize,
oh my God,
everywhere he looked, like the nurses and staff.
Diverse faces.
Diverse person. I mean, diversity is a strength of NHS workforce.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that is actually, even though that is funny, that actually reflects how many staff members are actually in the front line managing these patients.
Oh yes.
It is our strength, diversity, and we have got a extremely skillful task force of employees working for NHS, and we are fortunate to be working for this wonderful organization as well.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, I have a question before you round up. Is that alright?
Seems our producer has a question for our guest. What's your question?
Alright, basically, in terms of getting the BME community on board, all these tests that we've talked about, testosterone, cancer screening, whatever screening that anyone approaching the age of 40, 50, 60, should be, doing. I feel like our administrators can do more, and if there's anything in place, I'd like you to let us know as well. In terms of, ladies, when they approach 40, they get invitation for smear test, for cancer screening, for diabetes. My partner has gotten that, and she's about 38, that she's gotten about 4 or 5 letters in the last 1 year or 2 years, So, and have not gotten anything. I'm older than her, so I've not gotten anything like that. So even if I am one of, the BAME community we're talking about that don't chase up this test, if I get a reminder, don't you think that would be helpful to motivate me to do that? Because what can you enlighten us about?
Okay, going back to the regular health checkups, as we explained earlier on, at the moment all these checks and everything is initiated and facilitated by the GPs, and I didn't realize how the GP service is functioning in this country, how overstretched they are. We get 10 minutes for a consultation, and most GPs will specify one problem per appointment. That's the same thing we all encounter. As soon as you walk into the GP surgery, there's a notice on the door, one problem per appointment. But what government has introduced something called QOF, Quality Outcome Framework. So that actually makes GPs to take responsibility for their own population. That means we have to achieve certain percentage on cervical screening, and every patient with the diabetes has to have a blood test or a blood pressure check at certain times. They have to have a medication review every year. These are all part of the objectives which is actually set by the government. And the GP surgeries are paid incentives based on the performance, and they are mandatory tasks which are introduced by the government. Since those frameworks are introduced, I would say there are more options are available for GPs to let the patients know. So when I do a consultation in a GP practice, what I normally do is we'll get a little pop-up on the side of the screen to say this person is due for a blood pressure check, this person is due for an asthma review, this person is due for a diabetic review. So now we have a system where we can send SMS reminders straight to the patient's phones. So we'll click on the link to say, hello Mr. You are due for an asthma review, please ring the surgery, make an appointment. One click, message will send to the patient.
Or you complete a survey on your asthma
review or diabetic review, blood pressure check. That message will go straight to the patient. That way is working well, but only if we have a correct mobile number in our GP records. So whenever the patient rings, we ask them, okay, is that your correct number? Otherwise, make sure you have the correct information. So, and again, for men and women, we have an over 50 healthcare checkup plan. Everybody will be invited into the surgery or Wellman's clinic. So we'll have a blood pressure check, have a full blood test done. But now most of the GP surgeries are not performing face-to-face consultations, and most of them are over the telephone. All those things are actually quite limited at the moment. But there are options available. All these facilities are available, but a one-man GP managing a caseload of 7,000 or even 10,000 patients, there is no resource for a GP to send reminders to everybody. But
we live in a technological age.
Things are getting.
Calendars can send automatic.
Things are getting better. The SMS system is working well, and I use that every day. And patients, when they come for appointments, again, some of them won't turn up for the appointments. One missed appointment is a national wastage. Again, send them an appointment. Okay, you have missed an appointment. Make sure you turn up for the next appointment. And again, when you are actually due for a blood test, I normally say, okay, I have created a blood test form for you. Please collect from the reception and make an appointment for blood test. And you will see bundles of blood test forms still waiting to be claimed. So we're using all those resources. Options, technology is being well used. Most of the GP surgeries are actually moved on to a system called EMIS, which is a much modern system. There is an easy way of communicating with the patients. SMS system, still relying on paper letters as well, but through postage. But we're moving away from that.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's just back to what we said earlier.
Yeah.
Your health.
Yeah.
Is your responsibility.
Yeah.
Your health is your responsibility. If you've come from a country, third world country, where you have absolutely no access to good healthcare, and the semi-good healthcare you have available, you have to pay through the nostrils for. And now you're in a country where all these things are within your, fingertips.
Yeah. You just need to ask.
Do not wait for someone to come remind you.
Yeah.
You should be the one. Just that Bible passage, ask and you shall receive. Literally, this is what it was created for.
Yeah.
You have to ask. And then we carry out a follow-up.
Yeah. So you are paying, as an employee, you're paying a fair amount of your salary into the national service for your healthcare. So you have got all right to receive the full healthcare. Just ask them. Yes, I need an investigation. Say for example, for men, we have to do testicular self-examination. How many men do that? Once you reach a certain age, again, takes 2 minutes when you are in the shower.
Or do you want someone to remind you of that to check your own
testicles? Yeah. To take 2 minutes to examine your testicles, and if you find any abnormal levels,
then you go out and chase it up.
Same for females. Self-examination of their breast. Take 2 minutes.
Yeah. You can help your wife.
Yeah. Do it regularly. Ask for help. Okay, I need my investigations.
There you go.
Facilities are there. Just use them.
Use them. That's all.
Use them.
Shibu, thanks for coming. How will you be spending Christmas? For me, I know I will be at work. I'm working Christmas Eve, Christmas, Boxing Day. So I don't know about you. How are you spending this Christmas?
I'm also planning to work all day on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
But I'm off.
In the ICU, won't you, like that?
No, I'm working in Medoc on that Christmas Day.
Oh, right.
Christmas Day. So,
no worries. Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this episode. I am sure that someone watching out there would have gained a bit of information.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you finding the time to come.
Okay.
And we are going to give you another round of applause. Thanks for watching. This is the last episode for this year. Enjoy responsibly, and we wish you a Merry Christmas, and we hope that 2021 will bring the aliens. Okay? Stay safe out there until we meet next year. Bye.
Thank you. Done it.